A profound technological revolution, driven by advancements in robotics, renewable energy, and advanced manufacturing, is rapidly reshaping the global order. At the very heart of this transformative race lies access to crucial materials and minerals. Welcome to Strategic Horizon, where we uncover the forces shaping our world. China is strategically positioning itself as the undisputed king of clean energy, while Europe finds itself uncomfortably dependent on a limited number of countries, particularly China, for its essential raw materials. The demand for critical minerals is projected to quadruple by 2040, fundamentally altering the supply chains of the global economy, shifting focus away from fossil fuels and the nations that produce them. As billionaires openly discuss influencing governments for mineral wealth and global competition intensifies, China, the European Union, and the United States have launched massive infrastructure projects, each vying to secure crucial access to these raw materials. China, through its ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, has pledged significant investments to finance international projects aimed at advancing infrastructure in emerging and developing countries. As nations scramble for control, a critical question emerges. Can Europe truly secure the minerals it needs to power its future, or will its ambitions be held hostage by global supply chains? To understand the scale of this shift, let's compare the materials needed for a wind turbine with those required for a traditional coal power plant. Excluding fuel, the quantity of raw materials necessary for a wind turbine is significantly greater. The current global pivot towards renewable energy means that resources like copper, lithium, and cobalt are rapidly gaining importance, reshaping the geopolitical map around the countries that produce and process them. To give you a vivid idea of this scale, imagine this: a cube representing all the copper ever mined in the past 5,000 years. In the next 3 decades alone, we will need to extract 75% more copper than has been mined throughout all of human history combined. However, it's not just raw materials for clean technology that are reshaping global politics. The entire high-tech sector relies heavily on materials with limited and concentrated supplies, prompting a global rush by countries to secure them. Whichever nation gains reliable access to these resources will hold a significant advantage in key technologies, especially those central to the defense industry, and will reap the jobs and benefits of these lucrative sectors. Not all raw materials are equally important. Let's revisit our wind turbine example. While it requires substantial amounts of copper, steel, and concrete, these are not the most challenging materials to source, as they are relatively abundant. Copper, for instance, is produced by 12 different countries in quantities large enough to mitigate supply fears. Instead, the permanent magnets within its generators, which are made from rare earth metals, are the hardest to come by. This brings us to the concept of critical raw materials. These are natural resources that are irreplaceable for specific industries due to their unique properties. Take titanium, for example, which is exceptionally sturdy and lightweight, making it ideal for the aerospace and space industries. The European Union maintains a list of 30 critical raw materials, which it deems vital for its technological future. If we map their production sites across the world, we observe a dispersed distribution. Beryllium can be found in the United States, lithium in South America and Australia, and platinum and iridium in South Africa. Yet, when we turn our attention to China, we find an extensive list of exotic-sounding metals and rare earths, all crucial for electronic equipment and power generation. According to the European Commission, China is the primary supplier for 20 out of the 30 critical raw materials on its list. It's also somewhat ironic that europium, a rare earth element, is predominantly produced in China. This situation is partly due to geography. The European Union accounts for only 6.8% of the world's landmass, naturally limiting its indigenous raw material reserves. Geology also plays a role, with some countries simply being luckier in terms of natural deposits. However, it also reflects historical political priorities regarding the extraction of these strategic resources. Based on the distribution and production of these resources, the European Union has classified its critical raw materials according to their supply risk. At the bottom of this list are resources that the EU either possesses itself or can source from a diverse set of suppliers. At the top are resources where current suppliers are extremely limited. Let's delve deeper and examine the supply chains of the various technologies that rely on these critical raw materials. A report by the European Union analyzed the supply chains of 9 vital technologies, ranging from renewables to chip manufacturing and drones, all intrinsically linked to renewable energy, e-mobility, and the space and defense industries. When we investigate who controls the different steps of these supply chains, a clear pattern emerges. Across significant parts of the mining, processing, and component creation stages, one country has developed an undeniable edge: China. China not only possesses substantial reserves of critical raw materials, particularly rare earth metals, for which its state-owned firms control 95% of the world's supply, but it has also aggressively sought to acquire resources it lacks. Over the past decade, as part of its Made in China 2025 strategy, China has invested heavily in buying cobalt and lithium mines across the globe. Furthermore, it has become a leader in the processing of these materials, all the way up to the manufacturing of final products. Out of the 9 technologies studied in the report, China plays a pivotal role in the supply chain for 5 of them, with its control over the solar panel industry being the most pronounced. This presents a significant challenge for Europe. The continent is actively pushing for a digital and sustainable economy under the European Green Deal. Yet its entire plan could become dangerously dependent on supply chains that run through China. A staggering 98% of the rare earth elements Europe needs come from a single supplier, China. In 2010, a trade dispute saw China implement quotas that severely limited the export of rare earth metals. Faced with the stark possibility of trade weaponization, countries are now realizing that relying on a single foreign supplier for significant parts of their industry is not a viable long-term strategy, especially given that these same materials are vital for their defense industries. With the European Union seeking to reindustrialize and bring the production of key technologies back to Europe, securing reliable access to these critical raw materials is paramount. So, what can the European Union do? Let's explore the different policy options available to tackle these bottlenecks. The first strategy is to source minerals within Europe itself by developing local mining. Initiatives like the European Raw Materials Alliance aim to produce 20% of Europe's demand for rare earth metal magnets by 2030 by establishing a continent-wide supply chain. Similarly, new lithium mines opening in Portugal could potentially cover nearly all of Europe's supply needs until 2050. However, as we saw on the map, Europe has limited amounts of critical raw materials, which means it must also look for other sources. A second crucial approach is to significantly increase the share of recycling. This ensures that once critical raw materials enter Europe's economy in the form of vital products, they remain within its economic cycle. Every solar panel, electric car, or drone imported into Europe brings with it small but valuable amounts of critical raw materials. Through advanced recycling, Europe can retain these materials and reuse them to power its own industries. While Europe currently recovers none of its lithium and almost none of its rare earth metals, it's estimated that robust recycling efforts could provide anywhere from 40% to 75% of Europe's clean metal needs by 2050. Finally, there's geopolitics and the development of strategic partnerships with key suppliers. This is a tactic China has already mastered with its Belt and Road Initiative, which has served as the backbone of its geopolitical program since its announcement in 2015. China has been building infrastructure in exchange for mining concessions across much of Africa and South America. To compete, the European Union announced its own €300 billion infrastructure project called the Global Gateway, which is now part of an even larger infrastructure program led by the G7. This initiative aims to increase Europe's global standing and, incidentally, assist in securing mining contracts in Africa and South America. The inherent challenge, however, is that building a new mine takes considerable time. In the case of lithium, it can take anywhere from 5 to 10 years to develop a project from conception to full operation. This means that catching up to China's head start in controlling the world's mines and supply chains will be a formidable task. As a region inherently poor in mineral resources, Europe will likely have to contend with resource scarcity as a permanent factor. And this reality must be reflected in its industrial strategy and future plans. The scramble for these vital resources will undoubtedly define the geopolitical landscape for decades to come. Thank you for watching. For more in-depth analysis of global strategies and emerging horizons, join us again on Strategic Horizon.